Hello, and welcome to a short homily for Proper 25, Year A. Our readings for this day are Leviticus 19, 1 through 2, and 15 through 18, Psalm 1, 1 Thessalonians 2, 1 through 8, and our Gospel is Matthew 22, 23 through 36. Just last week I was in a conversation with Kevin Borderlon about stewardship. Stewardship is at the top of many of my conversations these days. Kevin shared a question with me that he had read, or perhaps he heard it online. Do you give out of guilt, ownership, or love? Do you give out of guilt, ownership, or love? Now, I'm not going to base my sermon today solely on stewardship, but I do want to focus on the giving of love. Love being the most important aspect in my life, love being the most important aspect in human life. If you Google basic human needs, you will find a plethora of information from articles for self-help to theses from world-renowned psychologists on human nature and well-being. And as you might imagine, one of the top 3 human needs, pretty much across the board, is love. A Forbes article explained that adults require a connection, physical or emotional, with other humans to release a certain hormones like oxytocin, and that human touch is so important that when we are young, our brains don't develop correctly without it. Furthermore, regular connection to others allows us to maintain a sense of well-being that allows for self-care. Well, that certainly explains the depression many of us are suffering from lack of hugs during this silly pandemic, and why so many children rush to hug their teachers and school employees when they see them. But certainly there must be more to it. In today's gospel lesson, one of the Pharisees, a lawyer, asked Jesus a question. Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? And Jesus responded, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. The law the lawyer is talking about here is the law of the Torah, a 5-volume book called the Pentateuch. The 5 books from one complete account of divine-human relationship, with Leviticus, where our Hebrew Bible reading comes from today, the 3rd book of the Torah, being the very heart of the Torah. Leviticus is about holiness, a holy God and a people called to be holy. Holiness means wholeness. Wholeness, in a sense, describes the life of God. More precisely, wholeness describes our lives when they reflect the life of God. Be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Jesus' response to the lawyer, found in today's Hebrew Bible reading, reflects these 2 basic rules of divine-human relationship, love of God and love of neighbor. Be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Verses 2 and 18. Amazingly enough, the fact that this twofold directive is alive and effective today is witness enough to its enduring validity. It is reasonable, sound, and time-tested. Scholars generally agree that the book of Leviticus, which is actually better represented as a chapter of the Pentateuch, was a product of centuries of development, beginning in the time of Moses between the 14th and the 13th centuries BC, and reaching its present form between 538 and 332 BC. Time-tested indeed. I've spent the last couple of months preaching on Paul's letters, and more importantly, his instructions for us as Christians. rules to follow for practicing the love of Christ, characteristics considered synonymous with being a Christian, how to live our lives in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ, and qualities that are necessary for salvation, our salvation. And today we hear a culmination of these instructions at the most basic level, simplified to the point of infancy and dating back to the actual words of God the Father over 3,400 years ago, the heart of the Hebrew Bible. Be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So why is it that something as simple and ancient, something as straightforward, uncomplicated, and time-tested, something quoted straight from the mouth of God, and on more than one occasion, is so hard for us to live into? Why do we continue to feed our prejudices and harbor hatred and contempt? Why do we judge and mock? Why do we ridicule? Whether you think it in silence, or if you post it publicly on Facebook, we're all guilty. Race, color, religion, denomination, sexual orientation, level of education, economic status, social status, political views, marital status, the list can go on and on and on. In our collect for today, we prayed for God to increase in us the gifts of faith, hope, and charity. Faith being a strong belief in God, hope believing that something good may happen, and charity, giving to those in need, kindness and tolerance in judging others, and love of humankind. Today we get to the heart of the law of stewardship. Like God, when you endeavor to be holy, when you endeavor to love God, when you endeavor to love your neighbor, do you give out of guilt? Do you give out of ownership? Or do you give out of love? Love and honor your neighbor as you love and honor God. Amen.